Welcome back to Terminal Talk.
The podcast where we break down the intersection of offensive security and human psychology.
Today, we are stripping away the myths surrounding one of the most misunderstood tools on the internet, Tor.
It's not just a darknet browser or a simple proxy. It's a brilliant piece of cryptographic engineering that trades blows with reality.
It really does. And I mean, frankly, the mainstream understanding of this technology is it's just aggressively shallow, you know?
Absolutely.
We hear it called an anonymity tool or a censorship bypass in passing. But those labels, they explain absolutely nothing about the actual underlying physics of the network.
Right, they're just buzzwords.
Exactly. So imagine you need to send a highly classified physical letter to a contact across the globe.
Okay, I'm with you.
But instead of trusting a single secure courier, you put that letter in a titanium lockbox. And you put that box inside another lockbox.
Right.
And then you put that inside a third lockbox. And then, and this is the crazy part, you hand the entire package to a complete stranger on the street.
Just a random person? Literally. Just trusting that the mathematics of the locks will force them to deliver it safely.
That is, I mean, that's such a bizarre, paranoid way to operate.
But it's utterly fascinating, right? And in this deep dive, we are tracing the exact journey of your data at the packet level. We're looking at the cryptographic handshakes, the statistical inevitability of compromise, and the active arms race against state-level censors.
I love it.
Yeah.
And that lockbox analogy, it really hits on the fundamental paradox we have to confront right at the start. To actually understand Tor, you have to abandon the idea of magical invisibility.
Yeah, Tor doesn't cloak your packets in some untraceable dark matter. It relies entirely on mathematically proving that no single entity in a chain has enough info to betray you.
Right. It's not about trust.
No, it's the opposite. The system is built on a philosophy of fragmented trust. I mean, in a typical VPN setup, what are you doing? You're just shifting your trust from your local internet service provider to the VPN provider.
You're just paying someone else to hopefully not log your data.
Exactly. You are still trusting a single entity. Tor assumes everyone is compromised. You aren't trusting the network, you're actively distrusting every single piece of the infrastructure.
And the cryptography is specifically engineered to enforce that distrust at every hop, which I always found fascinating because this paranoid architecture, it was actually conceptualized by the U.S. Naval Research Lab back in the mid-90s.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that.
Right. It wasn't built by cypherpunks trying to hide from the government. It was built by the military trying to protect open source intelligence gathering.
Well, because think about it. If the Navy operates a single, perfectly secure proxy server for its operatives in hostile territories...
The adversary doesn't even need to break the encryption.
Exactly. They just monitor who is connecting to that specific server. The mere act of connecting becomes the metadata that, gets an operative killed.
Wow. Yeah, so that historical context is critical because it defines the entire threat model. The Navy realized that anonymity loves company.
Yeah. You can't hide intelligence officers if they're the only ones using a specialized network. They needed a system where military traffic blends in seamlessly with activists, journalists, just everyday citizens.
To achieve that, they had to design a protocol where the network itself couldn't distinguish between a general and a whistleblower.
Right. Which means you really need to decouple the software you run on your machine from the network it communicates with. Because this is where the public conflates two totally different engineering feats.
Oh, all the time. People say, I'm using Tor, when they really mean the browser. They say Tor is blocked, when they mean the network overlay.
Let's draw a hard line there. The application layer versus the overlay layer. Let's look at the application layer first, the Tor browser.
Okay, let's break it down.
A dangerous misconception is that Tor browser is just a standard web browser that happens to route through a proxy. It's not. The reality is that the Tor browser is a heavily modified, extensively patched version of Firefox ESR.
That's the extended support release, right?
Yeah, exactly. The Tor project takes that base Firefox code and they completely gut it. They embed a highly specific Tor routing daemon directly into the client.
But they also radically alter the browser engine's behavior too.
Oh,
right?
massively. They preload it with components like NoScript to brutally restrict active execution environments. And they implement dozens of strict anti-tracking patches.
To stop telemetry and stuff.
Telemetry, isolating cookies to first-party domains, altering how the browser interacts with your operating system's actual hardware. We'll get into that fingerprinting stuff later, but it's extensive.
So the browser is essentially an armored car. It's an isolated, lockdown vehicle built to protect the cargo, your data, from the moment it leaves your keyboard.
That's a great way to put it.
But then we have the overlay layer, the Tor network itself. And this is an entirely separate beast. The network is an overlay consisting of thousands of volunteer-run relays scattered globally.
Right, so if the browser is the armored car, the network is the specialized, highly restricted highway system that it drives on.
Exactly. And you could have the most secure armored car in the world, but it still has to obey the physics, the routing rules, and the speed limits of the highway it travels on.
And that highway operates on the principle of split trust. The architecture guarantees that as your data travels, the route is fragmented. Tor ensures that no single relay ever holds the entire picture of who you are physically and where you're going digitally.
Okay, so let's build that circuit. Let's trace the data. We've got this heavily patched Firefox ESR. I type in a web address and I hit enter. What actually happens?
So we're looking at the famous three-hop circuit, the guard node, the middle node, and the exit node.
Right. And rather than just listing them, let's establish the absolute limits of their knowledge. When my laptop connects to that first hop, the guard node, what is the exact data it can extract?
Well, the guard node is your entry point. Because your machine is establishing a direct TCP connection to it over the open internet, the guard node unequivocally knows your real IP address.
So it knows where I live.
It knows your physical location down to your ISP, yeah. However, because of the encryption applied by your client, it has zero visibility into the payload.
So it doesn't know what website I'm requesting.
Not at all. It only knows that an IP address in, say, Chicago is feeding encrypted Tor cells into the network.
Got it. So the guard knows the who, but not the where. Then we hit the middle node. Now, in a world obsessed with latency and speed, throwing a middleman into a network route seems highly inefficient.
Oh, it is extremely inefficient, but
Right.
it's mathematically vital. The middle node acts as the cryptographic buffer.
Right, to separate the entrance from the exit.
Exactly. Its sole operational purpose is to ensure the entrance and the exit are never adjacent in the routing table. And the middle node is entirely blind.
Completely blind.
Totally. It receives an encrypted connection from the guard node, and it forwards an encrypted connection to the exit node. It does not know your real IP address, and it doesn't know the destination website. It just sees data flowing between two other Tor relays.
Wow. Which brings us to the edge of the network, the exit node. This is where the traffic drops back into the unencrypted internet, what we call the clear net.
Right, and the exit node must make the actual functional request to the destination server. Therefore, it absolutely sees the destination IP address.
And the data payload.
Well, if the traffic isn't secured by another layer, like HTTPS, it sees the entire unencrypted payload too.
But looking backward,
Looking backward through the tunnel, it has no idea where the traffic originated. It only knows that the middle node handed it a package to deliver.
so the website you are visiting looks at the incoming TCP handshake and logs the IP address of the exit node, completely blind to your actual existence.
Exactly. But we need to pause here and look at the actual mechanics of how this tunnel is built.
Yeah, because the standard explanation implies the network is doing the work, like the nodes are just passing it along and doing the encryption themselves.
Right, and that's entirely wrong.
Yeah.
Reality is that the Tor client running locally on your laptop is doing an immense amount of cryptographic heavy lifting before a single packet leaves your network interface card.
The client isn't just throwing a message into a pipe. It is orchestrating a sequential, nested handshake.
The client controls everything. When your Tor browser decides to build a circuit, it initiates a TLS connection to the guard node. Inside that secure tunnel, it negotiates a symmetric encryption key using an ephemeral Diffie-Hellman key exchange.
Let's clarify why ephemeral keys matter here. If a state intelligence agency physically seizes that guard node tomorrow and they rip the hard drives out, can they decrypt the traffic I sent today?
No, because of forward secrecy. The keys used to encrypt your specific session are generated on the fly and discarded the moment the session ends.
They're never written to disk.
Exactly. So you have this first secure tunnel to the guard node. Through that tunnel, your client reaches out to the middle node and negotiates a completely separate second ephemeral key exchange.
So now you have a tunnel inside a tunnel.
Yes. And finally, passing data through the guard and the middle, your client negotiates a third independent key exchange with the exit node.
This is the onion. The nodes aren't encrypting the traffic for each other. My laptop is encrypting the traffic 3 times over with 3 different keys.
Your client takes your web request and chops it into fixed size 512-byte blocks called cells.
Okay.
It takes a cell and encrypts it using the symmetric key it shares with the exit node. It takes that resulting ciphertext and encrypts it again using the key it shares with the middle node.
And then third time for the guard.
Exactly. It takes that result and encrypts it a third time using the key for the guard node.
That's brilliant. So when that deeply wrapped packet leaves my router, the guard node receives it. It applies its key, peeling off that first layer of AES encryption. Underneath, it just finds a routing instruction. Pass the rest of this payload to the middle node.
Right. The guard has no cryptographic ability to look any deeper. It just passes it along.
And then the middle node applies its key, peeling the second layer, revealing the instruction to pass it to the exit. The exit peels the final layer, finds the actual HTTP request, and fires it off to the destination server.
The nodes are mathematically restricted to being dumb routers. They can only read the layer they are cryptographically authorized to peel.
Even if the middle node is operated by a hostile intelligence agency intercepting all traffic.
Even then, all they see is a stream of perfectly randomized ciphertext coming from one IP and going to another. They cannot alter the data without destroying the integrity checks, and they cannot read the contents.
Okay, so the math holds up inside the tunnel. We've built an impenetrable three-hop pipe. But, and this is a big but, this intricate inside-out tunnel building creates a massive logistical nightmare.
Oh, huge.
If my laptop is orchestrating this entire dance, picking the nodes, building the tunnels, generating the keys, how does it know where the nodes are? I mean, I can't just query Google for list of Tor nodes.
No. A malicious actor could easily poison my search results, feed me a list of servers they control, and completely own my entire circuit.
Right, so the network topology requires an absolute verifiable source of truth. How is that handled?
It's handled by a core infrastructure component known as the directory authorities. The Tor network relies on a hard-coded set of highly trusted, geographically distributed servers operated by independent, established organizations.
So they are the anchors of trust in a trustless system.
Exactly. They act as the surveyors of the network. They are constantly pinging relays, measuring their bandwidth, verifying their uptime, and checking if they are properly configured.
Okay, and they have to agree, right?
Yes, they must reach consensus. Every hour, these directory authorities vote on the state of the network. They compare their individual measurements of all the relays.
What happens when they agree?
Once a supermajority of the authorities agrees on the data, they compile it into the consensus document. This document contains the IP addresses, public identity keys, routing flags, and bandwidth weights of every single legitimate relay in the network.
And then they sign it.
Right. The authorities cryptographically sign this document using their master identity keys.
So when my Tor browser boots up, the very first thing it does is fetch this signed consensus document. It verifies the cryptographic signatures against the hard-coded authority keys shipped with the browser.
And if the signatures match, your client knows it holds a pristine, untampered map of the entire global network.
That makes sense. So equipped with this map, the client has to make a critical decision, which nodes to select for the circuit. And this brings us to one of the most counterintuitive architectural decisions in offensive security.
The guard node paradox.
Yes, because my instinct, and I think the instinct of anyone trying to evade surveillance, is hypermobility. If I am trying to hide, I want to constantly change my entry point.
Like using a relay in Germany today, Japan tomorrow.
Right. A relay in Brazil the next day. A moving target is statistically harder to hit.
It feels logical. But in the specific threat model of Tor, hypermobility is mathematical suicide.
Break that math down for us. Why does staying still keep me safer?
Let's view this through the lens of probability over time. The Tor network is open. Anyone can volunteer to run a node. Therefore, we must assume that a certain percentage of the network is operated by hostile adversaries.
Like intelligence agencies or botnet operators.
Exactly. Let's say an adversary controls 5% of all the guard nodes globally. If you select one single guard node and stick with it for 3 months, you only roll the dice once.
You have a 5% chance of landing on a hostile node.
Right. And if you land on a clean, legitimate node, you are completely safe from entry guard compromise for the next 3 months, regardless of how many hundreds of circuits you build.
Because you are pinning your entry to that one safe node, the probability of compromise remains locked at that initial 5%.
Yes. But imagine you change your guard node every single time you build a new circuit, which happens automatically every 10 minutes or so in Tor.
Oh, wow. So you're rolling that 5% dice thousands of times a week.
The laws of probability dictate that you will eventually, inevitably, select a guard node controlled by the adversary. The chance of compromise approaches 100%.
And once you connect to a hostile guard node, the adversary has your real IP address.
And if they also happen to control the exit node you selected for that circuit, which is highly likely if they're running a large-scale Sybil attack. They own both sides of the connection.
And your anonymity is instantly destroyed.
Boom. Gone. So Tor enforces guard pinning. Your client picks a very small, static set of guard nodes and fiercely clings to them for months at a time.
It minimizes your sample size to prevent the statistical inevitability of hitting a malicious node. You pick a door, and you trust it. Because if you try every door in the hallway, you are mathematically guaranteed to eventually open the one with the sniper behind it.
It's a calculated compromise. Now, the exit node selection is governed entirely differently. Exit nodes are the public face of the network.
Right, because when a user utilizes Tor to exfiltrate a database or launch a denial of service attack, the target server logs the IP address of the exit node.
Exactly. The FBI doesn't raid the user's house, they raid the data center hosting the exit node.
Which means running an exit node is legally and financially hazardous.
Immensely. To mitigate this, Tor allows node operators to configure highly specific exit policies. An operator can configure their relay to state, I will allow HTTP and HTTPS traffic on ports 80 and 443, but I explicitly drop all traffic attempting to use port 25 for SMTP email.
Oh, so that prevents their node from being blacklisted for spam.
Right. Or another operator might block all standard file sharing ports to avoid copyright infringement notices. The consensus document publishes these policies.
So your client is intelligent enough to only build a circuit through an exit node that actually permits the specific protocol you are trying to use.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've selected our nodes, we've built the encrypted tunnel, and the math holds up inside the pipe. But data eventually has to leave that pipe to reach the actual website.
Right.
What happens at that exact millimeter where the encryption ends?
Well, the reality of network physics dictates that the Tor network cannot protect data it no longer controls. This is the localized threat of the malicious exit node.
Because Tor only guarantees that your traffic is encrypted within the overlay network.
Exactly. It does not magically encrypt the internet. When the exit node peels off that final layer of onion encryption, it is left holding the raw payload your browser generated.
If a user is visiting a legacy website that relies on unencrypted HTTP, that payload is completely exposed in plain text.
It is absolute clear text. A malicious exit node operator running packet capture software can quietly read every single byte of that HTTP traffic.
That's terrifying. They can harvest session cookies, intercept plain text passwords,
And read the content of the pages. Even more dangerously, they can perform active man-in-the-middle attacks. They can modify the HTML payload on the fly before forwarding it back through the Tor circuit.
like injecting malicious JavaScript exploits or replacing cryptocurrency wallet addresses on the web page with their own.
Yep. Which is why the adoption of HTTPS across the web was arguably the greatest upgrade to Tor's security model, even though it had nothing to do with Tor itself.
Right, because if the user is communicating over HTTPS, the Tor client's payload is a TLS encrypted tunnel. When the exit node strips the onion routing layer, it is just left holding a TLS encrypted blob.
The payload is secure, yes. The exit node cannot read your password or inject scripts into an HTTPS stream. However, the exit node is not blind.
It still has to route the TCP packets to the destination server.
Exactly, so it inherently knows the destination IP address. Furthermore, due to the server name indication, or SNI, in the initial TLS handshake, the exit node can see the exact domain name you are requesting in plain text.
So it knows you're visiting a specific banking website, even if it cannot see your account balance.
Tor obfuscates the route. HTTPS obfuscates the content. They are highly complementary, but they solve entirely different problems.
That's the localized threat. But the architecture of Tor was designed to resist adversaries far more powerful than a rogue data center admin. Let's pivot to the ultimate nightmare scenario for cryptographers.
The global passive adversary.
Exactly. What happens if a nation-state intelligence apparatus or a massive Tier 1 telecommunications backbone is monitoring both ends of the pipe simultaneously?
They were tapping your local ISP, watching data flow to the guard node, and they have taps at the massive data centers hosting the destination websites, watching data flow out of the exit nodes.
This is where we confront the absolute limits of low latency routing. If an adversary has visibility over both the entry and the exit of the network, they don't even need to break the AES encryption.
They don't need to steal keys. They simply apply end-to-end traffic correlation. They analyze the physical metadata of the data streams.
Because cryptography changes the content of the data, but it doesn't change the shape of the data flow.
Precisely. They look at timing, volume, and latency bursts. Imagine you request a complex, heavily graphical web page. Your local ISP sees a sudden burst of encrypted TCP packets flowing from the guard node to your IP address at exactly 14.02.33 and 145 milliseconds.
And that data burst totals precisely 4.2 megabytes?
At that exact same millisecond, the adversary's tap at the destination website's data center records the server transmitting exactly 4.2 megabytes of data to a known Tor exit node.
They match the fingerprints. It's essentially a massive game of connect the dots using time and mass.
It is statistical correlation. The data is encrypted, but the pattern of the data, the pauses while you read, the bursts when you click a link, the exact size of the video buffer, remains highly correlated across the network.
And if the adversary watches long enough, observing these synchronized patterns of entry and exit, the mathematical probability that the user at IP address A is communicating with website B reaches near certainty.
The anonymity is destroyed without a single cryptographic algorithm being broken.
So the obvious engineering pushback here is, why not destroy the timing? If correlation relies on synchronicity, why doesn't the Tor protocol just hold the packets?
Like add a delay.
Yeah. The client sends a request to the guard. The guard holds it in memory for a random interval between 10 seconds and 5 minutes, scrambles it with a bunch of fake decoy packets, and then forwards it. You completely shatter the timing correlation.
What you are describing is a high-latency mixnet, like the classical mixmaster email networks. And you are correct. Mathematically, a high-latency mixnet provides vastly superior resistance to a global passive adversary.
But Tor doesn't do that.
Tor intentionally rejects this architecture because of human psychology and the demands of the modern internet. Tor is engineered as a low-latency network.
Because if I click a link to read a news article, and the protocol decides to hold my packets for 20 minutes to scramble the timing signature, I'm going to close the browser and use something else.
Exactly. The modern web is inherently interactive. If Tor implemented high-latency mixing, usability would instantly collapse. Web applications would time out, TCP handshakes would fail, and real-time research would be impossible.
So the Tor project made a calculated, pragmatic compromise. They sacrificed absolute theoretical security against a hypothetical global observer in order to build a tool that humans can actually use for daily interactive web browsing.
Tor is a continuous negotiation between the paranoid perfection of cryptography and the practical physics of network latency.
That is a profound reality check. Okay, let's move up a layer. We've managed the routing, we've avoided the malicious exits, and hope the global adversary isn't correlating our timing. The website server only logs the IP address of the exit node. We are anonymous at the network layer.
But the modern internet doesn't rely solely on IP addresses to identify you.
Exactly. What happens when the website simply asks your browser to identify itself?
We enter the battlefield of browser fingerprinting. The modern web relies heavily on JavaScript to create dynamic, interactive experiences. But JavaScript allows a website to aggressively interrogate the local hardware and software environment of the browser.
Let's use an analogy. It's like trying to identify a specific car on the highway. You might have removed the license plate, which is your IP address. But if the car has a massive dent on the rear bumper, a custom spoiler, a highly specific pattern of rust on the door, and a customized exhaust sound, I don't need the license plate to know it's you.
I just matched the physical characteristics.
Exactly.
That is exactly how browser fingerprinting operates. When you load a site, its JavaScript silently requests a massive array of seemingly innocuous data points. It asks for your precise screen resolution.
It requests an enumeration of every single font installed on your operating system.
It checks your precise time zone, your language headers, and the specific APIs your browser engine supports.
And it goes deeper than that, right? Hardware-level stuff.
Oh, yes. Techniques like canvas fingerprinting and WebGL fingerprinting force your browser to render a complex 2D or 3D graphic invisibly in the background.
And because different graphics cards, drivers, and operating systems execute rendering instructions with microscopic variations, subpixel anti-aliasing differences, the resulting image is mathematically unique to your specific hardware configuration.
The script reads the pixels of that rendered image, hashes them, and generates a hardware-specific tracking ID.
So even if I route through 3 encrypted Tor nodes and emerge from an exit node in Sweden, if my browser hands over that unique combination of fonts, screen size, and canvas hash, the tracking network instantly recognizes me.
They just link your new Swedish IP to your existing behavioral profile.
Which is why the Tor browser had to implement a radical shift in privacy philosophy. A standard privacy extension, like a basic ad blocker, tries to block trackers or spoof fake data.
But the problem is, if you generate a fake, highly randomized profile, That randomization itself becomes a unique identifier.
Right. The tracker says, look at this incredibly unique fake profile that changes every 5 seconds. I don't know their name, but I know it's exactly the same guy who was doing this yesterday.
So the Tor strategy is not to hide you. The strategy is to make you look identical to everyone else. The concept is identical in the crowd.
The Tor browser forces the local environment into a rigidly standardized state. It explicitly blocks websites from enumerating your local system fonts, providing a standardized fallback list instead.
It locks the time zone to UTC. It blocks HTML5 canvas rendering from reading back the pixel data without explicit user permission.
And the most visually obvious enforcement of this is letterboxing.
Letterboxing is brilliant. If you allow a user to maximize their browser window to the edges of their monitor, you immediately leak their highly specific screen resolution.
Because a user on a massive ultra-wide monitor has a vastly different fingerprint than a user on a 13-inch laptop.
Right. So the Tor browser dynamically adds gray, inactive margins around the actual web page content. It forces the viewable area into coarse, standardized dimensional buckets, rounding the width and height to multiples of 200 or 100 pixels.
So instead of leaking a resolution of 1920 by 1080, it reports a bucketed resolution of 1800 by 1000. And thousands of other Tor users, regardless of their actual monitors, are also forced into that exact same 1800 by 1000 bucket.
You completely destroy the uniqueness of the metric, and this highlights why the Tor project constantly begs users not to install custom extensions or themes.
Users think they are improving their security by installing an obscured tracker blocker or a custom dark mode theme.
But in reality, they are destroying their camouflage. If you are the only user out of 100,000 who has a specific obscure extension altering the DOM, or who disabled letterboxing because you found the gray borders annoying, you have just handed the tracking networks the exact unique identifier they need.
You are no longer identical in the crowd. You have painted your armored car neon pink.
Exactly.
But the elephant in the room regarding the browser layer is JavaScript itself. Why doesn't Tor just aggressively disable JavaScript globally by default?
Because if you globally disable JavaScript, the modern web fundamentally shatters. It ceases to function.
Sites become unformatted text walls. Infinite scroll fees break, login portals fail to execute cryptographic handshakes, and video players refuse to load.
Disabling JavaScript turns the internet into a static museum. The Tor browser must balance extreme security against basic usability, so it leaves JavaScript enabled by default on its standard security setting.
But that concession opens up a massive, terrifying attack surface. Because JavaScript isn't just a layout tool, it is a highly complex, Turing-complete programming language executing locally on your machine inside a just-in-time compiler.
And that engine is written by humans, which means it contains flaws. A sophisticated adversary, often a state-sponsored actor or a law enforcement agency, isn't just going to try to fingerprint you.
Right.
They will write a customized JavaScript payload designed to exploit a zero-day vulnerability in the Firefox JavaScript engine itself.
Like a memory corruption bug or a buffer overflow in the parser.
Exactly. If the exploit succeeds, the payload breaks out of the browser's security sandbox and achieves remote code execution directly on your underlying operating system.
And at that point, the Tor network is irrelevant.
The malicious code is running on your actual hardware. It simply queries your operating system for your true IP address, your MC address, and your hostname, and transmits that data directly back to the adversary's command and control server over the open internet.
Completely bypassing the Tor proxy settings, the ultimate de-anonymization. So the browser provides a security slider to mitigate this.
You can elevate the security level from standard to safer, which disables JavaScript on all non-HTTPS sites and turns click-to-play on for HTML5 media.
Or you can push it to safest, which globally disables JavaScript entirely.
But the user has to accept the reality. The higher you push that slider, the more the internet breaks. Tor provides the tools, but it cannot eliminate the inherent architectural danger of parsing untrusted, complex code from the internet.
We've covered the internal network physics in the browser layer, but all of this assumes a massive prerequisite. That your ISP actually lets you talk to the Tor network in the first place. What happens when a national firewall, operating at the Tier 1 level, decides you aren't allowed to play? Let's analyze the active arms race of circumventing the censor.
We discussed the consensus document earlier, the master directory of all the nodes. That public directory is Tor's greatest strength for decentralization, but it is its fatal vulnerability regarding censorship.
Because the document is public, an authoritarian regime like the Great Firewall of China or Iran's national intranet can simply download the consensus, extract the IP addresses of every single guard node, and black hole them at the BGP routing level.
The deep packet inspection hardware doesn't even need to be sophisticated. It doesn't need to analyze the cryptography. It just sees a TCP/SYN packet destined for a blacklisted IP and drops it into the void.
And if you can't reach a guard, you can't enter the tunnel.
To combat this sheer brute force blocking, the Tor project engineered bridges. A bridge is functionally identical to a guard node. It is an entry point into the network, but with one critical architectural difference. It is intentionally excluded from the public consensus document.
It's an unlisted dark node.
Exactly. Because it's not published, the national firewall cannot automatically scrape it. A user in a censored regime must acquire a bridge IP out of band.
Like perhaps by emailing a dedicated Tor bot from a Gmail account or receiving it via an encrypted signal message from an activist abroad.
Right. They plug that unlisted IP into their Tor browser, and the client uses it to quietly slip into the network.
But the sensors adapt. We're dealing with sophisticated deep packet inspection now. A national firewall isn't just looking at IP addresses, it's performing heuristic analysis on the traffic flow itself.
Yeah, even if you connect to an unlisted bridge IP, the DPI appliance is going to analyze the flow and say, I see a continuous heavy stream of perfectly encrypted packets utilizing a TLS handshake that looks remarkably similar to Tor's specific cryptographic signature connecting to an unknown server. I don't know what this is, but it looks like evasion.
And they simply throttle or drop the connection based on the protocol signature.
Just hiding the IP is no longer sufficient. You must mutate the traffic signature itself. This birthed the implementation of pluggable transports, specifically managed through a framework called Lyrebird.
And pluggable transports take the already encrypted Tor cells and pass them through an additional mathematical transformation that radically alters their external appearance, timing, and packet size before they hit the wire.
We need to analyze the specific strategies here because the Lyrebird framework utilizes highly distinct methods. Let's start with OBS4. What is the mathematical approach of obfuscation 4?
So OBS4 relies on pure aggressive obfuscation. It takes the Tor traffic and scrambles it so thoroughly that it lacks any identifiable byte signatures whatsoever. It looks like random, unstructured static.
But its true brilliance lies in its resistance to active probing.
Explain active probing, because this is a fascinating offensive tactic by censors.
When a sophisticated firewall spots a suspicious connection to an unknown IP, it doesn't always block it immediately. Instead, the firewall itself acts as a client and sends a barrage of test packets to that suspected bridge IP to see how it responds.
So if the server responds with a standard Tor protocol error, the sensor knows it's a bridge and permanently blacklists the IP.
Exactly. So how does OBS4 survive a probe?
An OBS4 bridge requires the client to possess a specific cryptographic secret, a string of characters, before the connection is even established. When the sensor probes the bridge without knowing the secret, the bridge simply ignores the probe or responds with generic garbage.
To the sensor's automated systems, the server appears dead or irrelevant, so they leave the IP unblocked.
It's cryptographic playing dead. But looking like random static still draws attention. If a sensor decides to adopt a default deny posture where they block anything that isn't explicitly recognized as standard web traffic OBS4 fails.
Which leads to the implementation of Snowflake. And Snowflake is arguably one of the most brilliant architectural pivots in the history of anti-censorship.
Because Snowflake discards the concept of static servers entirely. Instead of connecting to a dedicated relay in a data center, Snowflake leverages WebRTC, the exact same peer-to-peer protocol that powers browser-based video conferencing platforms like Google Meet or Zoom.
And who are you connecting to? Volunteers. Everyday citizens, anyone living in an uncensored country, can install a lightweight Snowflake extension in their Chrome or Firefox browser.
So while they're simply reading the news or watching YouTube, their browser tab quietly spins up a WebRTC connection. It acts as an ephemeral, temporary bridge for a user trapped behind a national firewall.
The brilliance here is the human shield element.
It is exactly that. The IP addresses of these Snowflake entry points are highly dynamic. Residential IP addresses, a coffee shop in Ohio, a home network in London, a university in Tokyo.
A sensor cannot scrape a list of these IPs because they change every minute. More importantly, the DPI cannot easily block the WebRTC protocol without simultaneously destroying the modern communication infrastructure of their own country.
If they block WebRTC to stop Snowflake, they break every online classroom, corporate video call, and telemedicine portal in the nation. The collateral damage is economically unacceptable.
They weaponize the essential infrastructure against the sensor, but the arms race continues, leading to the newest transport mechanism, web tunnel.
Right. If Ops 4 is random static and Snowflake is peer-to-peer video, what is the strategy of web tunnel?
Web tunnel abandons protocol obfuscation entirely and shifts to protocol mimicry. It does not try to look like random noise. It tries to look incredibly, boringly normal.
It's engineered to perfectly mimic standard HTTPS traffic connecting to a mundane web server.
It hides in plain sight.
Precisely. It multiplexes the encrypted Tor traffic inside a seemingly standard secure WebSocket connection. To the sensor's DPI, the traffic flow, the packet sizes, the latency variations, the TLS handshake is statistically indistinguishable from a user browsing a standard high-volume website.
The sensor's hardware analyzes the flow and categorizes it as benign web traffic. It is a game of perfect camouflage, dramatically increasing the computational and economic cost for a sensor trying to filter it.
We've spent this entire time analyzing how the client navigates the network, hides its fingerprint, and bypasses the Tier 1 firewalls. We have thoroughly mapped how you, the user, hide your physical location from the destination website.
But we must flip the entire paradigm. What if the website itself needs to hide?
Exactly. What if the server hosting the content must obscure its physical location, its IP address, and its hosting provider from the world? We enter the architecture of V3 onion services.
This is the underlying architecture of what the media breathlessly calls the dark web. In a standard Tor circuit, the client is anonymous, but the destination server resides on the ClearNet.
A news website or a search engine has a public IP address. You can trace it to a specific server rack in a specific data center.
Right. If you have the IP, you can issue a subpoena.
But a V3 onion service operates entirely inside the confines of the Tor overlay network. It does not have a routable public IP address. Its address is a highly complex cryptographic hash ending in .onion.
And the absolute core requirement of an onion service is bidirectional anonymity. The real IP address of the server must never be revealed to the client, and the real IP address of the client must never be revealed to the server.
This is where network physics seems to break down. How can two distinct computers across the globe establish a persistent, bidirectional, low-latency PCP connection if neither of them is mathematically permitted to know where the other one is?
It requires a masterclass in cryptographic rendezvous protocols. The connection ultimately results in a 6-hop circuit, 3 hops originating from the client and 3 hops originating from the server. They build independent tunnels toward the center of the network and splice them together.
Let's walk through this workflow with excruciating detail. We will use a spy analogy. I am an intelligence asset, and I need to set up a secure drop site, an onion service. What is my first infrastructural move?
Step 1 is establishing a presence without exposing your location. Your onion service server boots up and selects several highly reliable relays within the Tor network to act as introduction points.
My server builds standard 3-hop Tor circuits to these introduction points and essentially plants a flag. It says, I am a hidden service. I will monitor this secure tunnel. If anyone wants to talk to me, deliver the message to this specific introduction point.
Okay, so you've established your secure mailboxes. But how does the rest of the network know where those mailboxes are?
Step 2 involves the hidden service directory, or HSDIR. Your onion service generates a cryptographic descriptor. This descriptor contains your service's public A25519 identity key and the precise network locations of the introduction points you just established.
Your server then signs this descriptor and publishes it to the HSDIR, which is a distributed, redundant database maintained by specialized Tor nodes.
The HSDIR acts as a specialized cryptographic phone book. I leave a chalk mark on a specific park bench telling contacts where my mailboxes are. Now, let's switch perspectives. I am the client. I am the user who has acquired this .onion address out of band. I want to visit the site.
Your client queries the HSDIR ring, utilizing the .onion hash to locate the specific directory node holding the descriptor. It downloads the descriptor, verifies the cryptographic signature to ensure the list hasn't been tampered with, and extracts the list of the server's introduction points.
At this point, my client knows where the server's mailboxes are. Do I just build a circuit and connect directly to the introduction point?
No, because that would link the client and server too closely. We need a neutral meeting ground. Step 3. Your client independently selects a completely random relay anywhere in the Tor network to serve as the rendezvous point.
My client builds a standard 3-hop circuit to this rendezvous point and establishes a highly specific, one-time, secret cryptographic word.
You've picked the coffee shop for the meeting, and you've established the password. Now you have to send the invitation.
Step 4. My client builds another independent Tor circuit, this one connecting to one of the Onion service's introduction points. Through this circuit, I send a heavily encrypted message, an introduction cell addressed to the Onion service.
This message says, I wish to establish connection. I have prepared a tunnel at this specific rendezvous point, and here is the one-time secret word.
The introduction point forwards that encrypted invitation down its existing tunnel to the actual Onion service server.
Yes. Step 5. The Onion service receives the invitation. It uses its private key to decrypt the payload. It verifies the request, and if it accepts, the Onion service builds its own fresh 3-hop circuit originating from its hidden location, terminating at the rendezvous point you selected.
And the final connection.
The Onion service connects to the rendezvous point and transmits the one-time secret word. The rendezvous point verifies the word matches the one provided by the client. Once verified, the rendezvous point splices the two circuits together. Data flows from the client through 3 hops to the rendezvous point, and then through 3 more hops to the Onion service.
The elegance of that dual circuit architecture is staggering. The client never learns the server's IP address because the client only communicated with the introduction point and the rendezvous point.
The server never learns the client's IP because it only reached out to the rendezvous point.
And the rendezvous point itself, the node physically bridging the data, is merely passing heavily encrypted TLS cells between 2 anonymous tunnels. It does not know the identity of the client, it does not know the identity of the server, and it cannot read a single byte of the data it is relaying.
It is a mathematically perfect double-blind meeting.
It is the absolute pinnacle of fragmented trust. Both entities are shielded by the physics of their respective 3-hop circuits. However, this level of bidirectional anonymity extracts a massive performance toll.
You are routing interactive web traffic through 6 geographically dispersed volunteer nodes. Onion services are inherently unavoidably slow.
The cryptographic overhead of negotiating those ephemeral keys across 6 hops is massive. But when absolute location privacy is the ultimate requirement, whether protecting a secure whistleblower submission system, a heavily targeted journalistic outlet, or evading authoritarian takedowns, there is simply no other network architecture on the planet that provides this level of mathematical assurance.
Which brings us to the final, sobering reality check of this entire deep dive. As we analyze the perfection of the mathematics, we have to look at the human element operating the machine.
We've spent an hour marveling at ED251 binding signatures, WebRTC pluggable transports, and 6-hop rendezvous architectures. The cryptography is sound, the math is relentless, but the system is brutally, unforgivingly intolerant of human error.
That is the ultimate vulnerability. We call it voluntary de-anonymization. The math cannot save you from your own behavioral choices.
You can establish the most perfectly secure, 6-hop, heavily obfuscated v3 Onion connection, but if you use that pristine tunnel to log into your personal real-name Google account, you have just instantaneously de-anonymized yourself to Google.
The network hid your IP, but your application layer behavior handed them your identity.
Document metadata is a classic trap here.
Absolutely lethal. A user downloads a sensitive PDF or a Word document over the Tor browser. The download itself is perfectly anonymous, but if they open that document in Microsoft Word while connected to their home Wi-Fi, the document might contain an embedded remote image or an active macro.
The moment Word opens, it executes the macro, which reaches out to the internet to fetch the image.
That request does not go through Tor. It goes through the standard operating system network stack, completely exposing the user's real IP address to the server hosting the image. The tunnel was perfect, the operational security was flawed.
And we have to explicitly address protocol leaks, specifically BitTorrent, because this remains a massive network-degrading issue.
Running BitTorrent over Tor is an operational catastrophe. Tor is strictly a TCP-only network. It is designed to route reliable, sequenced packet streams.
BitTorrent protocols, specifically the distributed hash table used to find peers, rely heavily on UDP, a connectionless protocol that Tor completely ignores.
When a user tries to torrent over Tor, the client often pushes those UDP tracker requests outside the encrypted tunnel, broadcasting the user's real IP address directly to the entire torrent swarm.
Furthermore, BitTorrent generates a massive, aggressive volume of simultaneous connections that overwhelms the fragile memory buffers of the volunteer relays. It destroys the user's privacy while simultaneously degrading the network performance for dissidents and journalists whose lives depend on it.
To help mitigate the buildup of dangerous state data, the Tor browser engineers implemented a highly visible failsafe, the new identity function.
The broom icon in the toolbar. It's a digital scorched earth button.
When activated, the browser systematically attempts to sever all state connections to your previous behavioral session. It violently closes all open tabs, flushes the cryptographic cache, permanently deletes all cookies, clears the IndexedDB and local storage environments.
And sends a system-level signal to the Tor daemon to instantly drop all active circuits and force the negotiation of fresh network routes.
It's designed to ensure that the request you make at 2:05 p.m. is mathematically unlinkable to the request you made at 2:04 p.m.
That is the theoretical goal. But users must remember that a modern web browser is a staggeringly complex machine comprising millions of lines of code.
The Tor project developers spend years hunting down obscure edge cases where browser engines inadvertently leak state between sessions. Vulnerabilities in the isolation mechanisms are discovered and patched regularly.
So while new identity is a powerful tool, behavioral discipline remains the absolute, non-negotiable requirement. Tor provides the cryptographic environment to make safe behavior possible, but it does not, and mathematically cannot, automatically make dangerous behavior safe.
So what does this all mean? Let's distill the immense complexity of this journey. Tor is inherently slower because network physics extracts a heavy toll for routing your data around the globe through independent, volunteer-operated nodes.
Tor doesn't eliminate the laws of physics, it negotiates with them. It protects your route by isolating knowledge, but it demands HTTPS to protect your content from the edge.
It protects your browser fingerprint by forcing you to look exactly like everyone else, but it requires you to suppress the urge to install custom extensions that destroy that vital camouflage.
It is a delicate, highly technical ecosystem. It requires the user to fundamentally understand the limitations of the tool they are wielding. Ignorance of the threat model is the greatest threat of all.
Very well said.
As we close out this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to ponder. We spent this hour dissecting how Tor functions by explicitly, mathematically refusing to trust any single piece of its own infrastructure.
Tor is an architectural masterpiece precisely because it does not demand blind trust from you.
Now zoom out and look at the rest of your digital existence. We have built an entire global internet predicated almost entirely on handing our most intimate, granular behavioral data to massive centralized authorities, telecom giants, cloud providers, social media conglomerates.
And just blindly praying that they behave ethically, that they don't change their terms of service, and that they don't get compromised.
Tor is one of the only tools in human history that looks at that centralized model and says, no, trust is a vulnerability. Let's mathematically fragment the data so you don't have to trust anyone.
It forces you to question the foundational architecture of the modern internet.
It really does. How much of your daily digital life relies entirely on the blind faith that a corporation will keep its promises?
Okay.
And what would it actually take to rebuild the critical infrastructure of our digital world based not on centralized vulnerable promises, but on the unforgiving, provable math of fragmented trust? Think about that the next time you casually click I agree on a terms of service pop-up.